Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and the good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, we love you in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on a beautiful March the 11th, 2021. Rondo Deportes, Big C will be called in shortly. I want to say welcome to Charlton and Big C Sports all around the world. You can follow Big C Sports. And today's a very special day for me. I want to say happy birthday to my beautiful daughter, Daisy, the most beautiful daughter in the history of the universe. Really appreciate that. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. When you go by and test drive yours, just tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really do appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I love pausing. I'm pausing like blowing out candles on a birthday cake, if that makes sense to you. A lot of pausings, a lot of huffing and puffing to blow those candles out. It's always very good to blow candles out and celebrate another happy birthday. Really appreciate that. Also, I want to make sure that we give out our Veterans Crisis Hotline. We have veterans that are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. That's what the National Crisis Hotline is for, and they really do a great job helping people. If you're going through things, you don't have to be a veteran, but the help is there. It's called the 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255 and get some help. If you go online, just go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can definitely get some help for our veterans and their loved ones. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. And our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country to help putting people back to work, just like McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, sports teams do it, watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you'll see a lot of opportunities. And most of our loans are underwritten by Rocket Mortgage, the #1 lender in the country on the wholesale side. Also, very happy to thank Xfinity Comcast TV and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and just say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up. And I really do appreciate they pop up anywhere in the world. So I really appreciate the way things are growing with the Big C Sports Podcast. It's amazing how sometimes you start things out and you wonder how things are going to, how they're going to end up, like a birthday. If anyone having a beautiful birthday, like my daughter, very grateful. I remember just seeing her born into the world and how wonderful she is. Very intelligent, very smart, very ambitious, very driven. And of course, I say she's the #1 daughter in the history of the universe. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking with it. It's all fair in love and war. I want to touch on a few things that are happening in the world of sports. And I know everybody's getting ready to start playing basketball now after the All-Star. We just have the All-Star break and the 70th All-Star game down in the beautiful city of Atlanta. And I know a lot of people are starting to regroup and try to figure out where do they stand? Like, where are they going to end up when the season resumes? And it's resuming tonight for a lot of teams in the NBA. But I know everybody still, they're thinking about, how did we get here? It was just last year, March the 11th, that the NBA actually started putting games on pause because of COVID-19. And as they put games on pause, people all over the country, in fact, all over the world, they were having to deal with how they were going to get sports back, how they were going to do it safely. There's a lot of high school programs that had to shut down just because of COVID. I remember when I heard about the news, we were actually out having a birthday party for my daughter when there was news that COVID had shown up on the scene and it was going to affect a lot of people. So I know it's amazing that the NBA has pulled off what they've been able to pull off in getting people back on the courts. And I know college basketball is going to do the same thing. Well, they've already done it. We're going to have March Madness. Did not have March Madness last year. It's amazing how sometimes we forget that we did not have March Madness last year. So the NBA second half is here. And you think about some of the games that are going to be played tonight. And then based on who wins those games tonight, there's always power rankings. But going into the schedule for the tonight, it's all based on who's going to win. The teams that started strong in the first half, maybe they won't be the same teams that end strong in the second half. I want to just take a look at some things. Can LeBron James and the defending champion, Los Angeles Lakers, can they wrestle away the Western Conference lead from the Utah Jazz? Can Steph Curry, the three-point champion, and the Golden State Warriors, can they stay in the hunt for the prize, the championship trophy? The NBA, the LA Lakers have it. They're trying to hold on to it, but they might have a little bit slippery fingers right now if they don't get Anthony Davis back in the groove, if that's all fair and love and war. But can the New York Knicks, of all teams, can they challenge the entire Eastern Conference to make Madison Square Garden relevant again? We don't know. I know the Knicks, they hope that they can, Big C. I don't think Patrick Ewing is coming back down to play in the paint and sweat all over teams that are trying to guard the great Patrick Ewing. It's all fair and love and war. You have the March 25th trade deadline looming, and which teams will add another star, and which will be dealing stars for the future, Big C, with the addendum of a play-in tournament, which I really like in each conference. More teams than ever are candidates to make a splash in the playoffs. I remember there's always those teams that were rated around 8, 9, and 10 that were always trying to battle to get into that final playoff spot. Now it's going to be more possible, and a lot of drama is going to happen in the NBA for a lot of teams. But I'm going to start off with Big C's top 10, the power rankings for the NBA. This is after the All-Star break. Even though they came across the finish line and they were leaking a little bit of oil, you don't want to leak oil in Utah, Big C. The Utah Jazz, they are 27-9. Previous ranking was number 1. Second half storyline, can the Jazz maintain their grip on the NBA's best record? There hasn't been anything fluky about it. The first half of the Utah Jazz, they had the league best point differential plus 8.8 points per game, and that's by a wide margin. Although Utah lost 4 of its past 7 games, they were leaking a little bit of oil coming across the finish line. The Jazz looked to break into a 2.5 game lead. Think about that. They just lead about 2.5 games, but they lost 4 games coming down the stretch, and that's something that they have to right away. When you lose 4 of your last 5, they still have the best record in the league, so that tells you they did a lot of things right starting out. And when you think about the West is always tough. But this year, the Eastern Conference may have just started to creep up a little bit on the good old boys from the West. I look at the West and the league's softest schedule in terms of opponents, winning percentage the rest of the way, putting them well on the path to become the top seed in the West. Not so fast, my friend, the LA Lakers are saying. Not so fast, my friend, when they get the great Anthony Davis back. But you look at a couple of games. On March 24th, you have the Nets versus Utah. You get a chance to measure up arguably the league's most talented team on national TV. The Jazz had the worst performance of the season with a 130-96 loss in Brooklyn, despite the fact that Kevin Durant did not play and James Harden had forced his way. Hadn't forced his way to the Nets yet, but he had forced his way out of Houston. And so that's a big game coming up. Also, April 17th, at the LA Lakers, the defending NBA champion LA Lakers, looking for a championship number 18, as if the teams with the best record versus the defending champion isn't enticing enough. It's a storyline but it's not going to be a storyline if Anthony Davis is not healthy. That's just my opinion. And then you look at LeBron James. Added some juice to his matchup by snubbing the Jazz All-Stars when picking teams, but that's just a little bit of Western Conference fun. They were trying to do that. May 7th, people may not think much about the Nuggets, but May 7th you have the Denver Nuggets. Think about this. If they can knock off the Jazz, they beat them down in the bubble in the playoffs, and more recently ended Utah's 11-game win streak. That was in January when the Joker had 47 points and 12 rebounds and 5 assists. So he was doing his thing. It's still tough to see, in my opinion, that Utah has everything down the stretch. My opinion, that they don't have enough down the stretch. But we'll see. Quinn Snyder's an excellent coach, and he'll have them good old boys ready. But I still feel that there'll be challenges coming out of the West, maybe even by the Lakers, and of course the Clippers are right there knocking on the door. But don't look too past that good old team down there in the desert called the Phoenix Suns. So we'll see what happens with that. I want to go to the East Coast, and when I talk about some of the top teams in the power rankings in the Eastern Conference, you have the Brooklyn Nets. They're coming in at 23-13. Previous rank was number 3. Second half storyline: can Brooklyn keep everyone on the court? Health is going to be a top priority. Steve Nash, he manages the remaining regular season schedule. The flip side, however, is the fact that the Nets have 3. Think about this. They have 3 big men that have played together for only a total of 186 minutes. That's 7 games. The talent is there, especially in the acquisition of former All-Star Blake Griffin, who jumped over a car in a slam dunk competition, but that was many, many moons ago. But it's important games coming up in April and May. The chemistry is going to have to be there. That's always a question. How do you fit into a team that's already doing pretty well without you? So that's something that Blake Griffin's going to have to deal with. Maybe the biggest game, media-wise, on the East Coast, when you look at players and even media, I don't know if they're going to allow many fans in the stands. I know some fans are starting to do that. But you have March 15th, the Knicks versus the Nets, the battle for the East Coast Big C. You have 3 months ago, not many anticipated this being compelling. I mean, I didn't for sure. Eastern Conference matchup, but there will be serious hype around this one and a lot of intensity because the first time in a long time, the Battle of New York is actually going to matter. It's going to matter a lot. And wouldn't it be something if the Knicks knocked off the Nets? I doubt if that's going to happen, but they have a chance. You always have a chance. April 10 versus the Lakers. Many people feel a preview of the NBA Finals. If the Lakers don't get Anthony Davis back, this is not a preview of the NBA Finals. And even if they get him back, you still got to look at the Clippers in Phoenix and also the Jazz. But the Lakers, they make a trip to Brooklyn for a possible Finals preview. And you know they're not going to get the home calls if they're in Brooklyn. They'll get the Brooklyn cooking. If you've ever been to a Brooklyn restaurant, a lot of good deep-fried food in Brooklyn. I'm sure they'll try to give the Lakers some deep-fried food, and they'll be a little bit sluggish in that game. But the first meeting in L.A. was a good one, but it was also missing key components: Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and this one could be scaled back even more accurately to size. I look forward to it. No matter who's going to win this game, you still want to see the top players come out and compete because this is what the NBA loves. Man, you ever think about anyone that says do the Big C pause? Well, I'm doing the Big C pause. I was thinking before Blake Griffin came over to the Nets that the Philadelphia 76ers would be the team that comes out of the East. And I'm still looking at the Philadelphia 76ers to play in the Eastern Conference Finals and most likely against the Brooklyn Nets, unless the New York Knicks have something to say about that, and I doubt it. But April 14th, the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets. Think about this. The Nets and the Sixers created some separation as the last 2 favorites in the East. And while it's not guaranteed they'll meet in the Eastern Finals, there's still teams like, for some reason, Milwaukee's still hanging around there. Boston's always a talk. Doesn't matter what their record is. They have a lot of young talent. But I think about an Eastern Conference Finals with the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets. A bold prediction: the Nets get better with the defense. And I think bringing in Blake Griffin, he's not the guy that he was when he was jumping over cars, but he can bring maybe another 15 to 20 minutes of play to rest some of the starters, and we'll see what happens. But I'm going to tell you to the Philadelphia 76ers, they're 24-12, number 3 in my opinion. Will Ben Simmons stay aggressive? I know Ben Simmons and also Joel Embiid, they were kept out of the 70th NBA All-Star game because of some contact tracing with COVID-19. But they got to stay aggressive. And they have Doc Rivers there at the helm. Maybe just what the doctor ordered. The 76ers, they know where they're going to get from Joel Embiid. He's actually playing like an MVP this year. Whether he gets it or not, no one can say that he's not one of the top 3 players in the league the way he's been playing over the last couple of games, really over the first half of the whole season. I think Joel Embiid is arguably the NBA's best center. He's certainly the most dominant. The low post presence, he's dominant, he's physical. He has an attitude now that he didn't have a couple of years ago. People said he didn't want to work hard. Now I think he's turned that into an attitude when he's playing like he has an attitude. But Simmons has recently turned up his level of aggression, his level of play on the offensive end, and it's made a notable difference. The most eye-popping display of this came against the Utah Jazz last month in a game in which Embiid didn't even play. And Simmons dropped a career-high 42 points, dropped them all in the bucket. But it's also happened to be plenty when Embiid has shared the court with him in recent games, and when Simmons is aggressive like that, using his singular combination of size and strength to attack the defense, Philadelphia becomes a different team. They're a different breed of cat, or that be a different breed of cheesesteak, if that's okay with you. It's all fair in love and war. But I'm looking forward to seeing Philadelphia, when they're healthy, giving Brooklyn everything they can ask for, if that makes sense to you. Another thing that we're going to look at is, I'm looking at another, I look at it this way. There's a lot of games that are on the schedule, and everybody has their own opinion about it. I'm going to bring Big C in, and I'm going to get this thought about Philadelphia and what they're going to look at as far as big games coming up. I'm going to do that in just a moment as I reach out for Big C. Give me just one moment, and I'll bring him on the call. All right, I got Big C on the line now doing his thing. Just talking about Big C, the NBA power rankings, and Philadelphia is the team that I'm focused on right now. Already gave some thoughts about the Brooklyn Nets, and they have some big games coming up. Also, the Utah Jazz. I know Utah lost 4 of their last 7, but they still have the best record in the NBA, and everybody has their opinion. So let me just do this. I'm going to get your thoughts in. I'm going to get your thoughts on the Utah Jazz. They are 27-9. Can the Jazz maintain their grip on the NBA's best record? I don't think so, but give me your feeling if they have enough gas in the tank. Big C, your thoughts.
As long as they stay healthy, they got a big 3 on their roster that they're not concerned about anybody else in the league, and that's the reason why they have the best record in the league, Charles. Yep. They got Conley, they got Mitchell, they got Gobert, and all 3 of those players were all-stars.
Yeah, they're all all-stars, and that's very well said. Brooklyn Nets, I know they got a nice addition with Blake Griffin, a former all-star player, but Kevin Durant, obviously they're still looking at his hamstring, if that makes sense to you. Give me your feeling, Brooklyn Nets. A lot of people say they're definitely the number 1 seed. I don't know yet, but give me your thoughts on if Brooklyn is really worthy of that number 2 seed at this time. Big C, your thoughts.
I don't even know if Blake Griffin can still play. He hasn't dunked the basketball since October of 2018. So he's not putting fear in anybody's heart. The team has been better off without Kevin Durant letting James Harden take the leadership role.
Yeah, James Harden has been doing his thing. And now, before I reach out to you, Big C, I got the Philadelphia 76ers coming in the number 3 seed. They're 24-12. They have Joel Embiid, who did not play in the All-Star game because of contact tracing. Also, Ben Simmons didn't play in the All-Star game because of contact tracing. But there was a game where Embiid did not play and Simmons dropped 42, his career high. And they have a big game coming up. It's March 25th at the LA Lakers, the night of the trade deadline, so people really got to pay attention to that night. And if Anthony Davis is not in the game, that's probably not going to be as difficult as a lot of people think. But if Anthony Davis is there, I think this is going to be a battle, maybe a preview of what could happen in the NBA Finals. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Sixers have to pull the trigger before the trade deadline to get themselves a shooting guard. That's the only weakness that team has in the East.
Yeah, that's something that they got to look at, and sometimes you got just what the doctor ordered, a good shooting guard. March 30th, they have a game at the Nuggets, and who's the best center in the league? Is it Joel Embiid? Is it Nikola Jokic, Big C? After Embiid missed the first game between these teams because of the NBA health and safety protocol, we'll see who can get the better of who. And I know that people might say that Jokic is a better passer, but if Embiid has his game on the way he's able to do it, I think he's a lot more physical. Yeah, but Jokic is a better passer, But if it goes down inside the paint, I mean, both of these guys are like neck and neck, Big C. Your thoughts?
But see, whenever you put if in front of a player, that means that there's question marks. You don't have to put if in front of Djokovic.
Yeah, but no one's calling the Joker the MVP, and they're looking at that for Embiid. So they can decide that when they get out there in the paint together. It's all fair and level war. Another big game that may be a preview of the Eastern Conference Finals is April 14th. You have the Brooklyn Nets, and they're playing at Philadelphia. This might be the most anticipated game in the second half, period, no matter which teams are playing. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it comes down to being healthy. I don't think that anybody's anticipating games a month down the road, 2 months down the road. They're playing them a game at a time, and you got to look at the second half of the NBA season when you're going to have teams not getting consecutive nights off. You're going to have to basically play a game every other night, so it's going to come down to attrition in the NBA in the second half.
Yeah, that's always attrition. It's already a story in the NBA. You have the defending NBA world champion LA Lakers, Big C. They're 24-20. Second half storyline, how much will chasing the number one seed in the West matters? They just got to get into the playoffs, and everybody knows that they're probably going to get the benefit of the doubt on some calls. That's just my opinion. I thought I saw that last year in the bubble, but they're a dominant team. When it comes to the big matchups for them, the March 25th matchup, again, talking about that trade deadline for the 76ers, they need a shooting guard. And the Sixers have had success against the Lakers in the past couple of seasons with Ben Simmons locking in on LeBron James, Joel Embiid counterbalancing Anthony Davis. Give me your feeling on what we might see. And you got four guys that are looking at maybe in the conversation for MVP, Big C. Your thoughts?
No, you might have one. I don't think that LeBron is going to come down the stretch being the MVP of the league. So Joel Embiid has an upper hand on him in that capacity. They're a much better team on the court than what the Lakers are. Anthony Davis is not going to be back for at least another month, so he's not going to make that matchup. So Philadelphia will dominate the Lakers.
You got April 4th versus the Clippers, the Lakers and the Clippers. It's the Battle of L.A. I talked earlier about the Battle of New York with the Brooklyn Nets versus the it's funny when you say the New York Knicks in the battle for anything. It's all fair and love of war. But the Lakers and Clippers, every Lakers-Clippers game since opening night of last season has been must-see TV, Big C. Really no different this time, except for you got to have a healthy Anthony Davis, or it's just L.A. versus L.A., Big C. Your thoughts?
Anthony Davis, like I said, won't be back for another month. The Clippers have a better outside shooting team than the Lakers do. The Lakers right now put fear in no one.
Well, you might say that, but they're still a top seed, and a lot of people might disagree with you, especially when they are healthy. And even not being healthy, they're still one of the top teams in the Western Conference right now. They do have that April 10th at the Nets. And even if you have a healthy Anthony Davis, Lakers versus the Nets, it's an affair that a lot of people are looking at having if KD is healthy. And because KD didn't play last time, and Brooklyn still came into LA and they got to win. But I'm just feeling that maybe Anthony Davis wasn't 100%. But if they all healthy and no one has any excuses, which one do you tip the court to? Will it be the Nets or will it be the Lakers as your favorite? Big C, your thoughts?
I got to go with the team that can shoot the three-point shot down the stretch, Charlton, because as teams get tired in the second half of the NBA season and you got to play games every other night where you're not going to get those 2 or 3 games off during the rest of the season, Charlton, it comes down to the team that can shoot the three-point shot. You can have somebody going down into the paint, making a shot, from 10 feet away, but you can have somebody cast it out from 30 feet and knock down that three, and all of a sudden they scored one more point than you. And as those things accumulate, that's going to be the difference, and that's going to be the difference in the NBA champion this year, Charlton. The teams that are the better three-point teams will be in the finals.
Yeah, it's all fair in love and war, Big C. But I think last year the Miami Heat had the better three-point shooters, even though they had a player that was injured, and they got knocked out by the Lakers, which are not a better three-point shooting
That's what
team.
it comes down to, injuries and staying healthy. If you're healthy and your three-point shooters are healthy, and that's the reason why when you look at Utah, their three-point shooters have been knocking it down. When you look at the Nets, their three-point shooters have been knocking it down. The Phoenix Suns, their three-point shooters have been knocking it down. No one would have thought that the Warriors are in the position that they are in right now, but it's because of three-point shooting. The reason why the Lakers have been struggling, they don't have three-point shooting.
Yeah, and they also won the finals last year, and Anthony Davis had a hitch in his giddy-up, so he wasn't 100% healthy. But a team that's rising, you ever hear about the Phoenix Suns, Big C? They're playing like they had back in the days when Charles Barkley was bouncing the basketball around. They are 24-11. They're right now number 5 spot, previous number 6. The second half storyline is how hot will the sun get in Phoenix? We know it's going to be about 110 degrees in the summertime, but the final 37 games of the season, Phoenix finds itself with the second best record in the league, staring up at only the Utah Jazz. But it feels like, I don't know if it's fool's gold, because they have a lot of good young players, and they have a guy in Chris Paul, but Chris Paul has never won a finals, even though he's playing like he's worthy of anybody else in the game. Big C, your thoughts?
Those young players are rounding into form. They have a floor leader in Chris Paul. They are healthy. They can knock down the threes as good as anybody in the West. And that's the reason that record that they have with 11 losses is not fool's gold. It is showed that they have the young legs and the ability to knock down the key shots. In the second half of the season, that's going to continue. Yeah,
it's going to continue. That's what they hope. So when you look at the Clippers and you look at the Lakers and you look at the Nets and all the teams that are always up in the top 2 in the East and Western Conference, I want to bring you to the Suns now. It's a big game. It's after the trade deadline. It's April 28th versus the LA Clippers. I'm telling you, there's something about this Phoenix Sun team that has to scare a lot of people. You know, when it gets hot, a lot of people get afraid. But you have the Clippers, and then you have April 30 versus the Jazz, and then May 9th at the Lakers, Big C. They have a gauntlet of 1, 2, 3 that they may, I mean, I don't think they can sweep them, but they may come out of there 2-1, Big C. Your thoughts?
They can come out there 3-0. Who knows going to be in the Clippers lineup in that time, Jock, because they're always talking about load management. The Lakers, they can outshoot the Lakers from the perimeter, and that's the advantage that they have. Can the Lakers run up and down the court with them at that high-paced offense, Jock? Can they go out on the floor with a 3-guard set and match up with them? I mean, you can have LeBron going to the basket, getting 2-point shots. But when you have Booker offsetting that with a 3 from the outside, and who's going to play against Aiton? He's become a dominant center for the Suns.
Yeah, well, the Suns went 2-1 against those teams in the first half of the year. They beat the Jazz and the Lakers, and they dropped one to the Clippers. They'll play each other twice in the second half. All 3 games will be crucial because you know you got the second half, you got Portland and Denver hanging around. Before we get up on the Big C pause, I want to bring you to a team called the LA Clippers. That was everybody's favorite last year to unseat the Los Angeles Lakers, but sometimes you get a call here or there and the ball bounces a different way. The LA Clippers, they're number 6 seed right now, 24-14. Previous ranking number 4, second half storyline. Are the Clippers better than last year? Because they finished disappointed last year. In fact, a lot of people said they played like they didn't even have heart down in the bubble last year. Through 28 games, the Clippers have looked like a better offensive team. Even with 6 men of the year, Montrezl Harrell gone, and Lou Williams, inconsistent play. But the clutch against strong teams, the great Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they've shown a tendency at sometimes to get stagnant and not as dominant as they should be. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, what is dominance in professional sports, Jonathan? Because even your opponent is a perfection. It comes down to who's having a hot hand on that night, especially when it comes down to basketball. It's about shooting percentage. It's about who's going up and down the floor. I mean, it's not about marqueeism, because you saw what Denver did last year in the bubble with the miraculous run that they went on. You saw what the Miami Heat went on in the bubble. It's about being healthy and hot at the same time will get you a run throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, like last season, the Clippers had some injuries and other health issues disrupt the team and chemistry. As long as Ty Lue has a healthy Leonard and George, I think the Clippers play a lot closer to being one of the top 2. Maybe that's even hard to say with the Suns coming along so close, but I'm going to put them as one of the top 3 seeds for sure, because the Jazz, I don't know if they're going anywhere. The Suns look good. The Lakers are going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt as defending champions, so the Clippers have a lot to prove. But I want to touch on this before the Big C pause. A big game to watch, maybe media-wise, maybe not so much when it comes to the players. March 27th, 2 days after the trade deadline, they play the 76ers in L.A. Doc Rivers makes it what should be an emotional return to Staples Center, and to prove that he has a better team with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. And can he outcoach the great Tyronn Lue? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you know, we put so much emphasis on coaching in the NBA. It's not about coaching. It's about what your players do in critical moments of the game. It's like having Utah with the best record in the NBA. That's because the players have performed. They're not worried about the names on the back of other players' jerseys, Charlton. They're looking at the ticker and the score up on the scoreboard. That's the only thing that matters to them. The opponent is an inanimate object, and that's the reason why Utah and Phoenix are the number 1 and 2 teams in the West. Those other teams have to unseat those two teams because they're going to end up with the home court advantage in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And by playing in your own arena, Charlton, it makes a difference. And there's going to be fans in the stands when it comes to the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, and last year, no one played in the bubble in their own arena, and there's a lot of exciting basketball. We'll see what happens. We're going to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. When we come back, we're going to finish off with some talk about the NBA power rankings for the top 10 teams. And in the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the number 1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps. You can follow Big C Sports, and I really do appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. I also want to say thank you to Xfinity Comcast TV and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and just say it. Play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up from anywhere in the world. And we've even had more apps that we're on, and I really do appreciate the growth with Big C Sports. I want to take you to a team that for the last couple of seasons in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks, they have the 2021 NBA All-Star MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo, who never missed a basket, even had a three-point basket come off the rim or off the backboard and knocked it through. But they've been a little bit disappointing at the end of the stretch the last 2 seasons. They're 22-14. Previous rank was number 5. You look at Giannis, Big C, and what he did in the All-Star game. If he could only do that every night in a regular game, not miss any shots, people would say, man, he looked like the late Wilt Chamberlain. It's all fair and love and war. But Giannis does continue to play at an MVP level. He's showing why he's won the award back-to-back seasons. But I know the award that he really wants to win is the one that says NBA champions. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it comes down to Milwaukee having a shooting guard. I mean, that's something that they've been missing in the playoffs. The reason why Giannis was so effective in that All-Star exhibition, Charlton, is because he didn't have to handle the ball the entire game. And it took that workload off of him. But, you know, as far as him stacking up in the Eastern Conference, I mean, you got 3 teams that are right there together in the Eastern Conference. You got to look at Philadelphia, you got to look at the Nets, and you got to look at Milwaukee in that order. And then whoever comes in fourth, which most likely end up being Boston, those are the teams that should end up in the playoffs, in the semifinals in the East.
Yeah, a lot of people are getting ready. Coach Budenholzer took a lot of heat because he was, you know, you got to blame somebody. And when you don't get through, when they say you're the number 1 seed the last 2 years, sometimes it does get a little hot. They got a big matchup coming up March 31st at the LA Lakers, and a lot of people are looking forward to that. But I want to ask him, there's another matchup that maybe Philadelphia has gotten the edge, along with Brooklyn getting the edge over the last 2 years. Number 1 favorite Milwaukee Bucks, Big C, May 4th versus the Brooklyn Nets, Big C. They haven't had this much excitement in Brooklyn in a long time, Big C. But the May 4th versus the Brooklyn Nets, one of the Bucks' biggest threats in the East is a new super team with three-point shooter James Harden, Kevin Durant. I don't know if he's going to be healthy or not. Kyrie Irving, who can have the best dribble in the NBA, and they have a point to prove. Milwaukee will have to bring not only his A game, but his AAA game to have a chance. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if it's a point to prove for the Nets. I mean, they're sitting right there with an outstanding backcourt. James Harden has to be really considered in the MVP voting, Charlton. That's how much he has meant to this organization since coming over in the trade from Houston, averaging a triple-double. No one would have thought he'd have done that, but he's leading the NBA in assists since that trade has taken place. And that's the difference right now in the NBA. What do you possess on the outside? I mean, the big man has almost become obsolete in the NBA. This is a three-point shooter's game. So it's about shooting a high percentage at least in the mid-40s from the 3 range that's going to dictate the rest of the NBA season.
And a team that kept the heat, I mean, you keep the heat on people. You got it when it's cold. You got to turn up the heat, Big C. They play on May 15th versus the Miami Heat. The Bucks, much like last year, they were expected to win that game, but the Heat did turn up the heat and ended up playing as the Eastern Conference champion and ended up losing to the defending NBA champion Los Angeles Lakers. That's a big game to watch on the 15th. I want to take you to a team that was in the Western Conference Finals just 2 seasons ago, the Portland Trailblazers. They have always had injuries, Big C. This year, they're 21-14. They're the number 8 seed. Previously, they were number 10. The second half storyline, can the Blazers rise into a contender like they had when they had the great Clyde the Glide Drexler, Big C? You think about the Blazers, they got a whole great backcourt that has star potential. They got C.J. McCollum. They have the Nurkic, Big C. And then Damian Lillard is always like the guy, like, why is Damian Lillard playing in Portland? He's a three-point shooter. He can score almost on anybody, Big C. Paul George knows that. But they're a team that always gets a lot of hype. But they got swept the last time they were in the NBA Western Conference Finals by the Golden State Warriors, Big C. Your thoughts?
Yeah, but this team comes down to Nurkic. You can name all those shooters, but they got to have him healthy in the middle. And he's been out for the last 6 weeks, Charlton, with a wrist injury. Once they get him back, it's like having the Joker in Utah, Charlton. I mean, in Denver. You got an active center who can pass the ball, who can shoot the ball. They need him to be effective in their lineup. I mean, as we look at the NBA as it comes into the second half of the season,
yeah.
I mean, we sit here and look at teams and matchups throughout. It's going to come down to the matchups in the playoffs. I mean, getting to the playoffs is the only thing that's on these teams' minds. Then you got to play against a good team every night, and that's where the Lakers have had a problem with. When you look at their record, they're losing against teams that are above 500. They're dominating teams that are not 500. And that votes into the playoffs because everybody you play every night is going to have a winning record.
Yeah, everybody you play is going to have a winning record. You have the Trailblazers versus the Suns. That's right after the break, Big C. The Blazers get a good measuring stick against the Suns. Chris Paul, Damian Lillard on the floor at the same time. Must-see TV, March 23rd. You have this same Portland team that's always been just taking a back seat. They've taken a back seat to Golden State. They've taken a back seat to the L.A. Clippers. They've taken a back seat to the L.A. Lakers. And now they may be taking a back seat to the Phoenix Suns. But they have a big matchup coming up against the Brooklyn Nets. This is a chance for people in the Great Northwest to show what they're made of. The backcourt matchup could be something to behold. Assuming if McCollum is back, Big C, the Blazers duo taking on the contrasting styles in Harden and Kyrie Irving, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, like I said, it's about being healthy and shooting. I mean, these games as we're leading up to the playoffs. I mean, yes, they got to be played, but are they all that significant when it comes down to where you're seated at in the playoffs? It's about having a hot hand at the end of that 72-game run and those in-between games. It's like if you were to rate the NBA right now and you look at the skid that the Lakers have been on the last month, how could you rate them as being one of the top teams even in the West when they've lost more than what they've won and other teams have dominated them? So it's about getting to that point. I mean, we can build up game after game and saying that it's significant. All games are significant throughout the season because it comes down to your seeding. But what's going to be important, Charlton, is once they get to the playoffs, are you healthy and are you hitting your outside shot?
Yeah, you got to be healthy. You got to have the outside shot. I disagree with that. You got to go down in the paint and win. The teams that win have been teams that dominated in the paint, and I think that's been proven throughout history. But it's all fair and level war. We will see what happens. Denver Nuggets coming in at number 9 at 21-15. Their previous ranking, they're still set at number 9. Second half storyline, can Michael Porter Jr., can he really raise the Nuggets from the West contender to a Western power? I think they had such a strong run last year in the playoffs. They need Jamal Murray. He showed that he was a different breed of cat last year. They need that kind of performance, but he played out of his mind last year, and I don't know if they can do it again this year in the playoffs. Big C, your thoughts?
I mean, if they're getting those type of outings from Murray and you get the consistency from Djokovic that you have, this is a team that's very formidable, Charlton, and you know, their record is not a fluke. They have consistently been there. It's always about getting a break in the playoffs, regardless of the sport that you're in. You get that break at the critical time, you're propelled to victory. It's not going to be just one game out of a 7-game series.
Yep. It's all fair and love and war. The break you want is the break you need. It's all fair and love and war. Everybody could use a break in life. But that's what you have When you look at the Denver Nuggets, they need a break. They need to play like they played last year. And finally, Big C, San Antonio Spurs, they're only 18-14. Coach Pop is always a coach that you look at that has won, 5 championships down with the San Antonio Spurs. They're nowhere near the Spurs that they used to be. But this is a second-half storyline. How will the Spurs balance this youth movement, Big C? DeMar DeRozan and Patty Mills, Rudy Gay, DeMarcus Aldridge, Big C. I mean, some of these players may be dealt before the NBA trade deadline. DeRozan still has an averaging 20 points a night and a career-high 7.2 assists. But it just seems like they're going to be in the playoffs, but they'll be on the backside of the moon, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I look at DeRozan moving on from the San Antonio Spurs, talking to a team that's in the top of their division that really needs that shooting guard. He can really lift a team like Philadelphia where he's so comfortable with that Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's all fair and level war. That's NBA basketball. A lot of good games on the shelf, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how things turn around for the second half of the NBA. Big C, I want to touch a little bit on black sports history, and I believe today President Biden signed that $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, so I think he was going to do it later in the week, but I believe that he's already signed it to get some food and some money into the hands of people that really need it. Black history, sports, every pro team's Jackie Robinson were inspired by the accomplishments. Great black men, Big C. Throughout history, July 5th, 1947, Big C, Lawrence Eugene Doby. Perhaps no one is more remembered for being second than Larry Doby. He was the second African-American to play Major League Baseball in the modern era after the great Jackie Robinson, Big C. He was also, when you think about this, the second African-American manager of a major league club after the great Frank Robinson, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Larry Doby was a tremendous player with the Cleveland Indians when he helped integrate baseball. He was an all-star catcher. But to go on and become the second manager of a major league team, second African-American manager behind Frank Robinson. And you think about the accomplishment of all three of those men, Robinson and Doby. All three of them are enshrined in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, all of them in the Hall of Fame. He may have been second in those two regards, but Doby was so much more. Doby began his baseball career as a star infielder for the Newark Eagles, Big C, of the Negro National League, and was also the first African-American player to play professional basketball in at that time, the ABL, the precursor to the NBA. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it always showed why white people were so fearful of black athletes, Charlton, because their dominant physical superiority. That here it is, we have black athletes over the years. I mean, we celebrate the guys that we've seen on television that played two sports, Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson, and people of today think that those players created the dual sport superstar. But here's Larry Doby, that not only did he integrate the sports, Charlton, but he was one of the first superstars to play multiple sports.
Yeah, one of the first to play multiple sports. 1947, only a few months after the great Jackie Robinson's major league debut. Cleveland Indians owner, his name is Bill Veeck, Big C. He signed Doby, who became the first African-American player in the American League. During this time in the big leagues, Doby was a 7-time All-Star and put together 5 100 RBI in 8 20-home run seasons. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, not only did he sign Larry Doby, Bill Veeck is quite an innovator in professional sports. Not many people realize that he was multiracial as an owner of a professional baseball team, Charlton. Matter of fact, he owned 2 professional baseball teams. Bill Veeck owned the Cleveland Indians at the time when he integrated the American League. Then he went on to own the Chicago White Sox. So he saw the future of baseball propelling, Charlton, and that minorities needed to be an integral part of it.
Yeah, and an integral part. It's 1978. That same man gave him a shot to play in the major leagues, and he did a great job bringing him on as the manager of the White Sox, as you mentioned. Upon his passing, it was June 18th, 2003. President George W. Bush said that Doby was a good and honorable man and a tremendous athlete and a manager. He had a profound influence on the game of baseball and a lot of respect even from the President of the United States. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, George W. Bush was a co-owner, Charlton, of the Texas Rangers. So he had many of opportunities to interact with the late Larry Doby, Charlton, and understand his character as a man. But he also understood what he had to go through in being a Negro in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, it's a lot of good things that he was able to get done just by giving people a chance to say, yes, you can have the opportunity, you have the qualifications for it, and you definitely have the opportunity for it. Big C, I want to touch on when it comes to opportunity. You think about college football, and I'm going to go back to basketball in a bit, but I want to just bounce the ball over to college football, Big C. Less than a day after defending Kansas, think about this. The great Les Miles, the gentleman Les Miles, the people used to call him a gentleman of a coach. Athletic Director Jeff Long has stepped down from his position as part of a settlement agreement. Kansas will pay Long $1.375 million in monthly installments. That's going to go through February of 2022. It's amazing how you get $1.375 million for doing wrong or hiding up things. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, I mean, these guys are very savvy when they negotiate their contracts with these universities. Even if the university is going to get rid of what cause, is that they have these little catchers in there that you're going to pay me to be quiet.
Yeah, you got to be paid to be quiet. It's a shame because they don't pay the women who were dealing with the assault. But, sometimes people get away with things for a short time. So on Tuesday, Long claimed that a series of background checks were conducted before the Jayhawks hired the gentleman Les Miles, Big C, and no one in LSU's athletic department raised any red flags, Big C. That's called some looking the other way, if that makes sense. Also asked Coach Miles directly during the interview process whether there was anything in the past that could potentially embarrass the university or himself or the program, and Long said no, and maybe some people believed him. That's why they're able to go forward, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, that goes back to Long and Miles having a long-term relationship, Dalton. Those two gentlemen had known each other over 20 years, and they had worked together in the past.
Yeah.
So this was a nepotism hiring job when he brought Les Miles in to get his old buddy off of the street, Charlton, who had been dismissed at LSU. But he knew about Les Miles' past. This was just him covering his butt.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to cover your butt, Big C, especially when it's cold outside or when it's down there in the swamp and all that swamp heat, Big C. He's also said he did his due diligence by talking to individuals. Did this sound like Urban Meyer up at Ohio State, Big C? And individuals at the LSU athletic department to see if there was anything that they should be aware of regarding Coach Miles' tenure at LSU. And they received no indications of any issues. So I just wonder, I guess the people that are doing the verification and the vetting, they're only as good as their relationships with those people, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he said he spoke to individuals. What individuals did he speak with? A secretary that was working for Miles, Charlton?
Yeah.
A lower staffer in the athletic department?
Yep.
He didn't speak to anybody of power who have known for the reasons of Les Miles' dismissal at LSU.
Yeah, because sometimes they don't make it known. They keep it hidden, just like a cat sometimes hides under the steps. They want to stay hidden, Big C. Former Kansas basketball star and coaching assistant, the great Danny Manning, he's actually interested in the school's now open athletic director position, and I would hope that he's at least given an opportunity. They're going to do their vetting process, and it's amazing. As far as I know, he's maybe one of the most, I say, celebrated athletes that ever came out of Kansas. We know they had some great ones in the past, Big C, but it would be a great opportunity for him to come in and kind of get some of the young blood. Well, they already got him. They got enough paperbacks to get anybody to come to Kansas, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about the three greatest names in Jayhawk basketball history, there's going to be Wilt Chamberlain, there's going to be Danny Manning, and then there's going to be Paul Pierce, Charlton. But Danny Manning would be a viable option for the University of Kansas to hire their first black athletic director, Charlton. You've gotten so many young black athletes to come out there and play basketball. Why not instill some leadership from a black perspective? Yeah,
and especially when you think about Chamberlain had a lot of paper luggage when he was in Los Angeles. No one can figure out why he had so much paper instead of leather luggage. It's all fair in leather war. People do what they got to do. Going back to the world, thinking about guys like Danny Manning, Paul Pierce, the great Wilt Chamberlain, Big C, college basketball is so ironic, Big C. 1 year after COVID-19 canceled the NCAA tournament, the college basketball world is already ready for the big dance, Big C. Friday will mark the anniversary of COVID-19 when it turned off the lights, like the great Teddy Pendergrass saying, turning off the lights, Big C. He said, turn them off! And people turned off the lights when Teddy started screaming that one shining moment. One shining moment. Everybody loves that at the end of the college basketball season. And think about it. It was March 12th, 2020. All sports in the United States is ceased. But the pandemic hit college hoops especially hard, ruling out that one shining moment. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, it was 1 year ago today, Charlton. Today is the 1 year anniversary that the world was declared a COVID-19 pandemic. You think about, you go back 1 year in America, we had 1,070 Americans who had tested positive for COVID-19 and just 30 deaths, even though those are horrific, Charlton, just 30. And yet today we've passed 527,000 deaths in America, and over 29 million Americans have been affected by COVID-19. The previous administration, with your red-faced friend who took it lightly and lied to the American public, Charlton, has caused so many unnecessary deaths in America. And that's the thing we have to think about. I understood that sports stood still for that time, but life had to continue on in America, and we were not able to stop the epidemic of death that Donald Trump unleashed on the American citizens.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people that won't wear a mask, and they're trying to take the mask off now because a lot of people don't like science too much. But back to the NCAA, Big C, the tournament is really stitched into our sporting hearts. It's in our conscious mind and even subconscious mind. We kind of a renter player aspect. You don't know who's playing where now, Big C. One and dones, the cheating scandals that go on, all the pompous coaches that are out there, and still the innocence for those of us who ever tried to touch the rim, dunking on an 8-foot rim. I think some of the best dunks I've ever seen was in a jumpy house where people weren't afraid to come down the wrong way, if that makes sense to you. But everybody has that one shining moment, and when you think about it, we have missed that from the past year. Big C, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's become a ritual of time in America, the NCAA tournament. When you send those 16 universities out there, Charlton, and everybody's competing to be number one.
Yeah.
We're all excited about the little boys knocking off the big boys, but it generally comes down to the Power 5 schools dominating in the end.
Yeah, the Power 5 schools dominating in the end, except for this year, it would be Gonzaga. The Bulldogs will cut down the nets. In Indianapolis, Indiana, it's all fair and love and war. Ironically, Big C, when we think about basketball, NBA starting again tonight, and it's March 11th. You think about this. Going back to March 11, 2013, Big C, 8 years ago today, think about it. It was an alley-oop from Chris Paul. It was a vicious, some people call it nasty, somewhat embarrassing, over DeAndre Jordan dunk on Detroit's Brandon Knight during the second quarter of the Clippers' 129-97 victory. That was at Staples Center. It was the greatest in-game monster dunk by an innocent bystander of all time, people thought. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, I mean, that dunk still resonates today. People can always talk about the NBA dunk contest where you're out there and you got a prop on the floor, Charlton, or you're running with the basketball and you don't even have to dribble it.
Yeah.
But anybody who has ever paid attention to the NBA and the greatest dunks that they ever want to resonate and talk about in the NBA, you have to move DeAndre Jordan to the top of that list.
Yeah.
That dunk was electrifying, Charlton. It was rim rattling and it was embarrassing. I mean, the perfect alley-oop, and you got a man that's 6'11", who is staring down on the rim by the time he catches this basketball at his apex. And the defender had no chance, Charlton. But after the dunk, the face that Jordan made after the dunk, not only the crowd's electrifying cheers that were going on, but the rest of the players courtside and on the court, all they could do was stand and look. They were all dumbfounded because they were all awestruck and had never seen such a dominant dunk performed during a live basketball game.
Yeah, well, there's a guy by the name of Moses Tear Down the Backboard Malone. I'm sure they could have gotten a look of that. When you break down a basketboard, you got to be a strong man to break down a basket. You got to pull the glass out of the basket. It's all fair, love of war, Big C. 1 year ago, COVID-19, the crisis became real in America, like a lightning bolt, Big C. A lightning bolt, you can hear it, but the thunder, you don't see it, you only hear it. The lightning bolt you can see. We can't see COVID-19, but we see the damage that is done. A lot of people have lost their lives because of it. And for most people, March 11th was when the COVID-19 crisis hit. It became real on the day for some people. Others called it fake news. It was a day of high-profile diagnosis. Most major events canceled, Big C. The official designation of a pandemic. Schools closed. Streets were emptied. Commuters stayed home and worked from home. Didn't know then that the virus had already infected thousands of Americans. Over the next 12 months, leaders, they bolstered opportunities to quell the spread, and the levels continued to rise, Big C. They fell at times, and then they rose again. And you think about the tragic souls, 525,000 people have perished. And even to this day, Texas is saying, hey, it's over now. We can open up everything, Big C. Your thoughts?
Charlton, we have a dozen states in America that's talking about opening up completely. This COVID-19 pandemic is not over. I know that President Biden has said that he'll have a shot in every American's arm by May. And hopefully so, Charlton. This is a much-needed relief for this country to try to get back to some air of normalcy.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the country has moved ahead without waiting to be vaccinated, Charlton. I mean, when you think about it, only about 35 million Americans have been totally vaccinated from COVID-19.
Yep.
So as we move forward, whether it's in everyday life or whether it's just in sporting events, we still have to operate with precautions. Wear your mask, social distance. Make sure you're sanitizing, Charlton, because this pandemic has been real.
Yeah.
Over 500,000 Americans have lost their lives, Charlton, and still counting. So sports might seem to be number one on everybody's mind, but you need to make caution and health number one on your mind.
Yeah, gotta stay number one. But some people don't believe in being healthy. They just believe in que sera, whatever will be, will be. And so you have some good old boy governors saying que sera, who needs science, but they'll make sure they get their shots, Big C. Thursday night's games, NBA basketball, March 11th. Happy birthday to my beautiful daughter, the best daughter in the universe. Really love you and appreciate everything that you're becoming as a beautiful, smart, intelligent young woman. Tonight's matchup, Detroit is at Charlotte, Big C. Boston's at Brooklyn. What a game that I'd like to see. Atlanta's at Toronto. Orlando is at Miami. People think about Miami. They were similar last year. They're a late sleeper. That's a team that can turn it on and turn up the heat, if that makes sense to you. Philadelphia at Chicago. New York, the Knicks are at Milwaukee. The Bucks, Big C, the Bucks better be careful. They might get nicked on, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, New York has been an exciting team in the first half of the season, Charlton. It's been a long time since someone talked about New York not being in the cellar, and that's great for the NBA.
Yeah.
This is one of those teams. They're young, they're aggressive, Charlton. They have an outstanding coach in Frank Vogel who's getting the most out of his players, Charlton. And they may be a hindrance to some top-ranked teams come playoff time.
Yeah, they just may be that hindrance, Big C. Minnesota at New Orleans. Dallas is at OKC. Golden State at the LA Clippers. Phoenix is at Portland in a must-see game in the Western Conference. And then Houston is at the Sacramento Kings. It's all fair and love and war. I hope that everybody has a great chance to see good NBA basketball and that everyone will stay healthy. I want to just close out with a little bit of football. NFL football, Carolina Panthers restructuring. The great Christian McCaffrey and Shaq Thompson deals 2 Pac-12 players, and also Valley Christian High School of Colorado for McCaffrey and Grant High School of Sacramento for Shaq Thompson. So hopefully everything's going to go well with them. But the Carolina Panthers, think about this. Their quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater, everybody loves him. He gets the okay and the thumbs up approval from Matt Rule. Is that a good thing or a bad thing when your coach says he loves you, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, right now the biggest problem with all NFL teams is that they're sitting around trying to restructure the salary cap.
Yeah.
The salary cap is down 8%, so you're going to have to make some critical moves with a lot of veterans. You're either going to have to release some veterans or restructure contracts.
Yeah.
I think the biggest worry in the entire offseason, Charlton, is that we saw the trouble that Patrick Mahomes was in during the Super Bowl. Right now, as of today, Patrick Mahomes does not have one offensive lineman that played in front of him in the Super Bowl or that played in front of him last season. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to restructure their entire offensive line. They're going to have to protect their investment.
Speaking of protecting investments, Russell Houdini Wilson, there's just some talk that he wants to go to Chicago. I don't know why. You don't have better fish in Chicago than you have in Seattle, Washington, coming off the Pacific Ocean. Also, if touchdown Russell Houdini Wilson goes to the Windy City, leaving the beautiful Northwest, he's not taking DK Metcalf with him. And the Seattle Seahawks have been a better franchise than the Chicago Bears over the last decade and a half. It's all fair and love and war. He'll do what he got to do. And then Texas, Houston Texans, Coach David Culley said his star quarterback Deshaun Watson is their top priority. They also said that about Hopkins and Watt before they let them go. It's all fair and love and war. Daisy, happy birthday, Big C. Back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble, young man, rumble, with all you've got to use. How can you lose, Big C? What are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, I'll quote that great American poet, LeBron James of the Los Angeles Lakers. He said, there's no freedom in the NFL. It's just another word for plantation. And those players can't go anywhere until that owner decides to get rid of them. Once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, first responders. You've been there standing strong in front of all of those Americans, all 530,000 of them that have lost their lives. You have fought to keep them all alive. And thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can be thanked every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As my mama always says, there's never ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please just pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.